And it is, once again, the Lean Into Artcast, the show where a couple of visual storytellers get together and engage with the topic, wrestle with it, and then spend a lot of time thinking about it. We think hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jersey Drozd. The type of visual storytelling I do happens to be comics, and then I also teach classes on how to make comics. My co host and my partner for tonight, once a week, is.
Hey, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I am a user experience designer, game creator, and the kind of visual storytelling I do mostly is related to the interactive space. And that could be related to serving collaborative effort and getting on the same page as far as like what we're solving and why and for who. Or it could be just to tell a story because that's fun and important.
Changing people's hearts and minds with ideas visually is pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, data doesn't stand on its own. It bounces right off of you if you don't have a reason to be open to it.
Nice way of looking at it. And I was borrowing language from the other show that you do called Art Science Punks, where you and your wife Kate Stenzinger introduced the show with my partner tonight and every night.
Yeah, she wrote that. It's funny.
It's cute. It's very Kate. Like we're only
Wow.
partners once a week.
Quite true. But it's been a while. Yeah, we've got a lot of these out.
Yeah.
And we've reflected hard on a bunch of different topics.
We reflected so hard, Rob. And we're going to do the same again tonight.
Right on.
So, first of all, good to have you back. We missed you while you were gone last week.
Well, it's good to be back.
And if anybody's new to the show and saw the antics and mayhem that happened last week when I was visited upon by my co-host from the Galaxy of Super Adventure, that is not a typical show. This is a typical show. It's a little bit more even paced and careful, and not as many beards and parrots and puppets. But I do thank them for helping out.
Oh yeah, thank you to the cast of the Galaxy of Super Adventure for being here. That's cool. Cool of everyone to make the time to do that.
So what happened to you in the last couple weeks, since it's been a while since we've seen you?
Well, one thing I definitely wanted to talk about is it's funny. I just go straight to the big thing I wanted to dive into is thinking about like when you go to see someone that you're very curious about give a talk, right? And then I happened to have the chance to see Steve Wozniak give a talk at a local college to the Minneapolis area called Augsburg. And that was pretty awesome. And what's funny is I did that like right after recording a podcast with Marshall Kocher, the Escape Artist podcast. So I actually, that was a busy Saturday. And actually that night I went to a daddy-daughter dance with both my daughters.
Wow.
It was a fun Saturday, but pretty wild. So, yeah.
This is on YouTube. I'm going to pull up Marshall's. We will link to this in the show notes. But yes, Creativity and Coding with Rob Stenzinger, Escape Artist Podcast, episode 98.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was super fun. Really awesome to be invited on his show. And it's coding is a topic that Marshall cares a lot about, that he is learning and exploring and has used a bit, but is, looking to grow with, and is, it's one of those things when an artist can be convinced where, okay, fine, I'm curious enough about coding and I'll be dabbling. But you can hit, depending on your fluency and your comfort, quite a steep learning curve, and depending on which path you take and whatnot. And what do you do, and is it worth it, and all that kind of stuff. We talked about a lot of fun things surrounding that.
Oh, and you know what? I don't think we've talked with you since you did Game Dev Day too.
Oh my!
Oh my gosh! So much has happened in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, Game Dev Day was a project that I worked on with Beth Korth of the Midwest Game Jam. That's her organization, and it was this project that we worked on with a local place to Minneapolis, actually Bloomington, Minnesota, called the Works Museum, which is kind of like a hands-on STEM museum where they have some semi-permanent exhibits and some new things that come in, and it's a lot of fun. Actually, when you were in Minneapolis a little while back, we went there. You can do anything like build castles with these big rubber heavy bricks, to like race connect cars, to like program these little turtle things through a maze, all sorts of cool stuff. But then they also have events, and that's what Beth and I helped, that we co-organized, Game Dev Day, which was all about providing learning experiences. Not like one big workshop, where workshop is familiar territory for me, where you're going to be at this event that will be some interesting chunked up sequence of experiences that you hopefully leave being more informed and maybe excited and whatnot to dig deeper. In this, it was like, well, they're tiny chunks, and we still want you to leave informed enough and to be excited and dig deeper. But it was more like a workshop, micro-sized, and at like almost like expo style, where you could visit these different workstations that you can learn game coding, game art, game sound, and music, game design, and also game critique, and review. So we actually had local, to the Minnesota area, game developers who had made their own things, and they were there demoing, but then they were sharing that with this sort of worksheet where, what do you think about the game, and how does it make you feel? And then depending on what your level of challenge was, you could help them sort of imagine and redesign the game. Like, how could it be better, and what would you do, and all this stuff. So actually, Kate was there tabling for This Panda Needs You, and getting lots of awesome feedback and reaction from kids who had sometimes, it was well met, and they would just give feedback of like essentially more dancing, right? The panda doesn't quite dance enough. to all the way like, can the panda hurt stuff? I want the panda to like punch things. So it was fantastic. Anyway, yeah. So there was a lot of other folks there that I'm super grateful for too, that helped. I mean, just do all this teaching at the workstations and whatnot, and it was a fun event, and I'm very grateful for how it turned out. Seemed like people had a good time.
That's great. What was the like a broad spectrum of age range, like ballparking?
I would say mostly in the 5 and up, but primarily between 5 and 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but then some teenagers intermingled in there and stuff too.
So exposing kids to the process at that early of an age, in a place where they're already used to having to, because I mean, like, I've been to the place you're talking about, as you mentioned, and the whole place is set up to be like, let's playfully engage with problem solving and puzzles, and right.
100%. Yep.
That's awesome. Good for you. And yeah, just how cool is that you're creating a cool experience for kids that helps them be more thoughtful and mindful about the things that they do.
It was an honor, and it was super fun. That's and I learned a ton. Like when you do this thing, you think, well, what would I do next time and stuff. And one thing here was like providing like a lot of experiences with Scratch, right? So there's this coding environment that's visual, and like it's like stacking different blocks to form logic and behavior. With like, there's a thing on screen. What happens if I click it? What happens if I, that kind of stuff? And then you make some blocks. That's Scratch, which is developed by MIT, but it's free and open source. And turns out, like, there would be a pair of kids going up to one of the stations. One of them would be, "Oh, this is neat," and the other one was cheering them on, and an expert in Scratch already, and they're like the same age. And that happened at least like 5-6 times, where I was like, oh my gosh, these two pals, there's someone new to this, but then someone who's there essentially encouraging them on, and essentially doing peer teaching. And I was like, whoa, we've got to add a new level.
Yeah. And find a way to like I don't know. Let me ask you: would you think about finding a way to reward that behavior in some way, where it's like,
Oh, yes, that's an awesome idea.
yeah, to
Yes.
like make that an institutional feature of this
Hmm.
event, right? This is for kids who like to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, like did you help someone? Like we essentially we had it structured where there was this sheet where anyone who was teaching a workstation could put a smiley face or a star or whatever they wanted near level 1 for a challenge or level 2 for a challenge. But then I could easily see then adding, well, did you teach level 1 or did you teach level 2? Right?
Yeah.
You helped someone get through that challenge. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be just one quick idea that could easily be delved into deeper.
And it's cool when like you discover that it's already there, and it's like, okay, well now how do I make this intentional from now on, right?
Hmm.
That's super cool. Um, well, I don't know. Maybe we should do an unboxing of that sometime, of like putting together the event from your perspective now. Having been part of events and helping, contributing to events, but then like taking one of the lead positions and putting together an event, uh, getting your perspective and experience, and how you think about critique and revision and iteration on future things with that, right?
That sounds like a lot of fun. That sounds like exactly what we do.
Yeah, it totally does.
Yes.
Um, but let's get back to this Steve Wozniak talk, because that's kind of a big whoop-de-doo, right? Steve Wozniak, kind of a big figure in the world of
Human history?
technology.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, seriously, uh for he is one of the individuals in a place and a time with the skill to have moved a lot of problems that have helped a lot of people, right? And so it was interesting to hear someone like that reflect on like what like his audience in that situation is people at different stages of their college career, and he's looking to you know try to emphasize things that he thinks are a great idea and de-emphasize others, and relate that to sort of his story. And um, honestly, like Steve Wozniak, if you're not too familiar, you might have heard the name or Woz, what have you. But if you're not necessarily that techie or a computer nerd or what have you, maybe you don't know a lot about him. But he was one of the co-founders of Apple Computer with Steve Jobs, and he also helped. He invented games at Atari. He essentially invented the game Breakout when it was an arcade game, and is someone who is an incredibly engineering minded yet creative person who continually looked at problems to solve just because they were interesting and stuff, and he kept working at it, and then he ended up being like very employable and hireable even as a high school student. um, and anyway, yeah, so he's got that kind of history where he had all these skills in essentially the early to mid to late 70s, where they're like essentially the whole personal computing revolution was, the pent up demand was there, and then he helped cause it to the demand to be met by first inventing the Apple One, which was essentially an open source computer where he shared the design with a group of folks. What were they called? They have a famous name, and just the computer club or something, where some folks in California were they would hack on things in their basements, and they would come share it. And so this is a thing that somewhat, it's so funny, like um, the whole like when we go to some group that is storied or whatever, Steve Wozniak was intimidated by this group, right? Where they were showing things that were nowhere near the kind of stuff that he was building, yet um, he didn't know if what he had to share was relevant and all that. And it's just kind of funny the stories we tell ourselves where, um, even someone like him who was ready to demo the Apple One and then finally did because, he wanted to share something back with that group and he knew that they had, um, they were almost essentially like a set of users that the Apple One was more or less a better version of the computers that they were essentially trying to program the Altair, I forget what. And the Altair literally was this, it was essentially a big rectangular box that had lights in the front and switches. And you would program it by flipping the switches and then loading stuff into like a sequence, right? One little sequence at a time, and to like build up ideas where right now you go in Scratch and you just stack blocks, where that would take like 10 hours on the Altair to do that.
Oh, Shadow Wingtronics, Troy is in the chat. He says, "Is this the homebrew computer club you're talking about?"
That's the Homebrew Computer Club. Thank you. Yes, 100%. And so they were really into that computer. It was available, whatever. But then Steve Wozniak eventually brought them like, well, here's the pattern. Here's the recipe to build an Apple One. And here you go. This is, they got excited about it. And he's like, here, this is it. A gift to you. But then also his very business-minded friend, Steve Jobs, was like, let's turn this into a business. And anyway, they were, he created essentially the Apple II, which was this very complete product, not like a kit computer, but you could buy it and use it to run programs and solve stuff. And the big program that helped that take off was the first spreadsheet, which was VisiCalc. And there's so I mean, this is the kind of thing where this is a person who helped launch a whole industry that has enabled me to have a career and stuff. And I grew up in a household where we had the first Mac, and I had an Apple IIc, which is pretty much an Apple II that looked like a briefcase. It was portable, right? Anyway, you Google Apple IIc and you'll see how portable that thing was.
I'll pull up a picture while you talk.
And I mean, so this is it came across my radar. Someone pinged me and said, like, do you know Steve Wozniak is going to be giving a talk? And I just was taken aback, where I'm like, it's possible that I could see Steve Wozniak talk, because I mean, he's honestly an incredibly he's a big person in human history. Not to like overblow it, but maybe in an alternate history, other people would have solved problems in slightly different ways that would have similar end effects and outcomes. But well, we live in this timeline, and he did it. And so I'm like, okay, this is what does this person present like? Will I be surprised or let down, or be like, well, they're at a different stage and whatever? I don't know, what will it be like, but like, I need to go see that. And so I mean, he would relate some context of his different adventures and problems he'd solved to like the questions that he was in. The format was he was being asked questions from I believe a professor of computer science from Augsburg.
So it was like a talk, like an informal conversation.
It was, yes, very much one of those things. But also knowing, like, you could say, "Hello, Mr. Wozniak," and then sit down and listen for a while.
Right. You could throw like any number of nouns at him, and he'll probably have something interesting to say about it.
Yeah. Exactly. So that, I mean, a little bit of context as far as like, why I went, and I went, and sort of like just scratching the surface as far as him. But so I'm curious to go where next, like what you're curious about.
Well, I would like to know what was the before we get to what you reacted to. Well, this will be a reflection of what you reacted to. I think is like I'm just curious what your takeaway of the big ideas that he hit throughout this talk. And I'm sure that your reaction to it will color the reporting that you do. It's like as you
Mm.
walked out, what were the things that resonated with you?
I have my biases.
Yeah.
They've been exposed many times through more than 170 some episodes on this podcast, and other places where I believe in providing learning experiences that have all sorts of different facets and ways to get into them, and having I don't know, some kind of openness to facilitation and whatever, but people can find their own paths and solve problems and gain experience and then be of service with whatever skills. And yet, let's see, so that can give someone the impression that like, oh, I'm only about self-directed learning. I think college is pretty cool. I happen to have not taken that path, but like, I coexist with it, right? I've learned so much from things people have published that they've studied in college, and have benefited immensely from various projects that, like anything, a variety of things like the lifelong learning stuff that came out of the MIT Media Lab, and the things like Scratch and things like, let's see, what would be another tangible. There was an old paper that early in my days when I was studying the idea of hypermedia systems. And it's a paper by Daniel Booch. I still remember his name, but I mean, this is something I literally read in like 96, and was called the Object-Oriented Hypermedia Design Methodology. And in a way, we've lived in a world that has so many of these concepts that are so familiar, you wouldn't have to get necessarily this nerdy about it. But it was a little bit of like my introduction to information architecture and providing learnable, usable experiences in sort of large, bodies of content, and like you could think intranets and that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's from a professor. I don't know if he was a professor at that point, whatever. Anyway, like giant love for things that come out of that system. What have you.
What
Anyway,
was that person's name again? So I can link
I
to it in the
think
show?
Daniel Booch. No. Oh, nope. Daniel. Oh, wait. Nope. Wrong name. So
Daniel
OOHD.
German?
Maybe. All right.
I'm finding a PDF here from 2003.
Author.
The Object-Oriented Hypermedia Design Method. Dr. Daniel
Okay.
M.
Yep,
German,
yep,
Department of
yep.
Computer Science, University of Victoria. No? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like distract you from your
Daniel Schwab. There we go.
Schwab.
All right. This was important. I conflated his name with a different object-oriented author, Grady Booch,
Oh.
which I
think there it is. I found the PDF. I will link to it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Okay. So, with that context, who knows? Like maybe Woz is going to like heavily endorse like a very academic path, or maybe not, whatever. He very much did a little hat tip as far as the academic world, but then was like, you just need to go solve the problems you want to solve. And that's not going to be provided to you in a planned institutional way. And then not be afraid to solve things that you don't know how to solve yet. So like, what do I want to do versus what do I know to do? And honestly, it was really interesting hearing him provide his rationale for that approach to learning.
Well, I'm curious what was his rationale. I mean, anybody who's
Um,
listened to any number of these shows knows that both Rob and I are going to be nodding in approval of that statement.
I was like,
Uh,
oh yeah, let's see where this goes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So what's his rationale?
um, well, because you can essentially because you can help people. Like you're out there making, especially if you combine that sort of motivation with the desire to make stuff better for people affected by the problem that you care about, then now you're actually bringing new useful things into the world, and you're getting experience that actually sets you apart as well, because in a lot of engineering you're getting this, it's like to solve the problem correctly, you're more or less solving the same problem with the same answer that everyone else is getting. But if you follow that kind of path where you're creating stuff that is like your unique take on solving a problem, so that gets to that has a different way, a different volume, a different kind of clarity as far as like how you go about um, sharing your capabilities with the world than someone else now you have a differentiator in your background, your history, your curriculum vitae, your resume, whatever. Um, and then in conversation about that, you have a lot of experience that you can bring to bear as far as describing your answer versus the commonly held, appropriate answer that everyone else will refer to.
Right. Well, when I was in college, this is how we did it, and I've got, and not again, not to besmirch college or anybody who goes to college. It's more like I myself found myself like in my early days, like right after having gone to college for a little bit, kind of
Mhm.
leaning on, well, I took a class on such and such, and therefore I can lean on that knowledge that I have, and the fact that I say that I took this class gives me a little bit of credibility on it. Whereas it's a different thing when that knowledge is gained through heuristics, through trying different things, through acquiring new skill sets. Versus, is that what you're talking about?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have a different relationship with the knowledge at the very least. And your story about the knowledge is going to be um, able to be conveyed through that lens instead of some commonly held like take on an academic explanation.
Or to put it in the language of comics, because that's hello, I'm Jersey and I talk about comics all the time.
Who?
It's but it's like the student who comes to me who says like, and you get this is an eternal thing because it's just it's their it's the context and the experience level that they're at. They say, "What's the pen I should use? What pen should I use to do this thing?"
Mhm.
And to which I say, "No, no, no. We're going to use all the pens, and you're going to find the one that does what you want it to do. The one that feels right to you. But I want to use the one that this professional uses because I like the way that they do the work." And yes, we've been through this. It's a misunderstanding of the layers of complexity that go into making the work. It's not just the tool. We know this, but in the exploration of finding the tool that suits you, then you have again a relationship with that learning rather than, well, teacher says I use this crow quill and that's the right pen to use, and so that's how I make the lines now, right?
And
Less transmission, more acquisition. Ooh, I
t-shirt time. Nice. I like this. There's it's easier to recall something that you have a deeper relationship with.
yeah.
And so if you have your reasons and your meaning and your um, that matchmaking that you've done of this is a tool for a particular problem, it's a different situation than what is the tool that I learned was supposed to solve this problem. And that's not a bad place that's a wonderful place to start, where this is the tool that I know is supposed to solve this problem. And it's just that there are many layers and hidden things underneath the supposed to that um, maybe matter to you, or maybe they don't. But if they, you get into a situation where you're noticing that the tool really isn't fitting the problem. You're not getting what you want out of it. There might be another way. And it's honestly part of the messages that Steve Wozniak shared in his anecdotes were about having a want and finding a way to get there. And that's, I don't know, somehow it's going to be enabled by, because he described like devouring and exploring tons of academic books outside of his normal curriculum. He's like a voracious reader and wanted to know as much as he could about the topics he cared a lot about. And the academic works were a fantastic source for that. But then that would be just increasing his vocabulary in solving problems, not increasing the detailed prescriptions.
Mm-hmm. Can I dig at this just a little bit? Because I'm not hearing this in what you're saying, but I'm recalling a personal experience recently with a student.
Ooh, yeah.
That I think kind of relates, and I just want to throw it out and see if this puzzle piece fits in. Talking with a student who was really trying to, they're taking on kind of a big project that is going to require them to learn some new software in order to really do everything that they wanted to do. And I saw them trying to lean on some stuff that they knew how to do, how to use, to try to like sort of push it towards doing something that it wouldn't normally do. I'm trying to be vague about this because I'm trying not to like call out, just like out of respect to the student's privacy. But they were trying to use existing stuff or tools that they knew how to use in a way that wasn't natural to them to try to achieve the end, when they knew, and they were kind of like very sheepishly saying to me, like, I kind of need to learn this other thing, don't I? And I looked at them and was like, yeah, you kind of do. And I was like, but you know what? It's big and it's scary and it's ambiguous right now because you have no idea how much effort is going to be required of you to get under the hood of this thing to make it do what you want it to do. But that path to do it is what's going to make this job super interesting, you know? So what I was inferring from what they were saying is they were trying to use their pre-existing knowledge to protect them from failing, right? I know how to use this, and if I use this, I know I can do it well. Therefore, this big, scary, ambiguous thing isn't as ambiguous because I have this tool set here that is, relatively speaking, under my command. If I have to bring in this other new thing that I've never used before, now it's double ambiguous, right? I don't know. Do you have a relationship with that at all, with this idea of like pre-existing knowledge being sort of a defense against the ambiguity of a creative thing?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, it's not to just, there's much more to my answer, but I mean, that's certainly something familiar in my experience, and actually it was a theme in this talk, because the professor did explicitly lay some context and then ask a question about dealing with risk and learning new things. And he described how there is a significant population of students who are in this sort of honors advanced placement position, and they are labeled as being geniuses or whatever. I mean, this is my paraphrasing, but they're labeled as this is a high performer. That you don't want to lose that label once you have it, right? And so he was like, some of these students are pretty risk averse, and a lot of the businesses that Wozniak has tried, and and the kinds of things that he explored as different diversions that weren't directly giant successes or whatever. It seemed like he thought that they were as fine and normal and as okay as like the big successes. Like they were just all stuff he did and he learned by doing the stuff. Like how does that work? How do you take take someone of this risk averse perspective and make them more willing to step outside of the familiar tools to solve problems.
And I totally
Yeah.
I a friend of mine recently said to me, and I thought this is a marvelous way of thinking about it, is he works in a career where there's a lot of unpredictability in the job, and he said, just once I want to have an extended period of time where I can enjoy my competence and expertise at what I do. You know, like he was bemoaning the fact that he had to constantly level up and constantly learn, and it's like just for a while, I want to be on cruise control and just enjoy the fact that I know how to do this particular thing very well. You know, and I'm like, I totally get that. That can be very satisfying. Um,
I think, I mean, there's times in supply and demand where you can get that for a little while. Like the early days of learning web technologies was like that, but now it's like everyone knows this basic stuff. And, but literally by learning enough basic stuff at the right time, I was super lucky and I was able to shift careers, which was actually talked about more in depth on the podcast with Marshall.
yeah,
So
another plug.
yeah,
Go check out to see the part 2 to this discussion.
Callback. Yeah.
Is
Alright.
this back in the days when they called them web gurus or webmasters? Webmasters. It was webmasters. That's what it was.
Yes. Like the postmaster.
I always thought it was like Beastmaster. It was like there was something mystical about it.
Dang it. I literally never considered that before. And I lost
Never?
I've lost opportunities. And now
Like
I
when
have
I would see
regrets.
that title, I always thought of like a really glistening chest.
I seriously thought of Ben Franklin glasses where I was like, okay, I'm the postmaster, Do you have some mail? Do you have electronic mail? Should I store this on the internet, on the web? And yes, I will hyperlink. And then I go click clap away on my
And
486
therein
pony.
lies the difference in perspective of the person who's on each end of the spectrum.
It's like, what do you mean? It's I honestly think a Beastmaster bias is a handy bias, and I just wish I had it. That's all.
No, I'm saying that like from my perspective in 1995, the publishing to the web was like magic, right? Like people who could do that like had powers that I couldn't even think of. So when I heard webmaster, I was like, wow, whereas you were
Sure.
actually doing it. So
Yeah, I was doing that, and that was it was super funny. Is in my career, I've actually never had that title. I did have web architect, and that was like, once I was labeled a web architect, I was like, holy crap, I better work really hard because I am not ready to architect webs.
well, there's that labeling thing again too, right?
Yeah.
Like
And for me, I was like, whoa, who put this black belt on my desk? Because I can't, I'll get my butt kicked. I need to study a lot. And then anyway, very helpful to, I don't know, like I didn't find that aspirational title crushing at all. I was like, I need to live up to this. And, so I don't know, I guess I found that enabling, but it was interesting in hearing the whole, like the risk aversion thing from the, on the other side of that. I suppose it's funny getting in some contexts. I'm sure like for everybody, like a title could be a little bit intimidating or essentially an aspirational thing. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to pull out an old quote that I like to bandy about, and it's the Chronicles of Narnia when Aslan is talking to Peter and Edmund, and he's telling them about what is facing them in the final chapter of the book. And when Peter hears the words, he thinks of courage or adventure, and when Edmund hears the words, he thinks of the word danger.
Mm.
That's
So it can be, well, mindset is a big thing.
mindset's a big thing. So I'm curious, did he have any thoughts on how to, because like it's easy enough to say like, oh, some people are risk averse, some people are not. And it feels like the knowing what you want to do versus what you know how to do is a way of reframing that a little
Mhm.
bit. Did he talk any more about like how to reframe things to turn risk aversion into from danger to adventure?
I think his main um, way of reframing that was saying, well, an inventor has to try. So if you're going to try to bring new things into the world, this is it's failing isn't optional. It's going to happen, and that it will help you bring about your inventions. So um, let's see. Ah, and also instead of okay, so if risk aversion leads you toward a path of um, getting roles that are incentivized only by money, and then that's informing your decisions. That's another way to get trapped into different risk aversion or to become, you know, cemented in being risk averse. Try to find ways to observe your own satisfaction with solving a problem. And I think for him that I mean, like that's a rough synopsis of Steve Wozniak's words. He I think was trying to convey that when you are inventing a thing that the outcome is making something better for someone else and that feels good, that's a signal to pay attention to. Whether or not it was a successful business, whether or not also inferring that that led to an A plus or high grade.
Right. And Troy in the chat, Shadow Wingtronics is saying like the MythBusters say failure is always an option. Right. Yes, that's a rephrasing of a famous Apollo 13 quote by Gene Kranz, where they were really desperately trying to get these three astronauts home, and Gene Kranz said failure is not an option, and that became the title of his memoir about that experience and his experience at NASA, which
Mm.
sounds it's a very heroic call to action. Failure is not an option. Um, what it kind of bypasses, though, is that there was a lot of trial and error to figure out the way to get those guys home. And if you watch the Apollo 13 movie, you'll get a sense of that, of all the crazy hijinks those guys had to go through in order to figure out how to get them. And you see Lieutenant Dan up all night trying to find just the right amount of things to turn on and off to get it under the amperage that they needed in order to be able to operate the machine, right? It wasn't that he didn't walk in and go like, "Well, I'm just gonna man this thing to death."
Sure. And he just squatted and went at it for like at least 20 to 40 minutes. And that's
So,
how you man a thing.
but you're also getting at something else that I think is like, I don't know about you, man, but I have a hard time with this. Um, yes, I teach classes and I find it immensely rewarding um, seeing seeing a kid over the course of 8 weeks in one of my courses go from feeling trepidation about using a certain kind of tool to feeling very confident and even helping their neighbor. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you do
Mm.
it this way. Um, that that stokes the fires. That keeps me going, right? Um, but there's a part of me that wants a larger community to recognize that, right? It's a valuable exchange. I help you show me that you have received that help and built upon that help, and now you're helping others. And yes, there's like when one could talk about that whole network effect. You've touched all these lives touch these lives. That's a wonderful concept. Um, but there's also not just the but you said money and getting an A plus. Um, those are very important motivators to make something sustainable. Yes? No?
Mm. I feel like we're getting into this is a good transitional question.
Those are very good instincts, Rob. You have excellent instincts for this. Okay, yes. So, in 1 minute and 30 seconds, we're going to address this conundrum. Rob just painted us into a corner with this. It's like, don't judge by money, judge by satisfaction. But I need the money to have the satisfaction too. Otherwise, I can't show up to teach class in a potato sack and not having eaten in 3 days. How do I reconcile this thing? We will reconcile this thing, or we'll do our best in a minute and 30 seconds. But, in order to keep this show sustainable, we got to thank some people who make this show possible, and that's the people who support us on Patreon. What is Patreon, you may be wondering? If you are, it's Kickstarter, but for ongoing projects, right? So instead of just contributing one time to make a thing come to life, you're contributing over multiple months. You pledge like you do to like a PBS drive, like $1 a month or more, whatever you can afford, whatever you think the show is, what the show's value is to you. Enough people do it, then it pays for the time Rob and I put into making the show. And we want to take this opportunity to thank 5 of the people who have been supporting us on Patreon. Give a shout out to them. And the first one I want to mention is Angela Mitchell. And Angela Mitchell can be found on Twitter at Angie Makes Stuff. Thank you, Angela, for supporting the show and making it sustainable. Shawnee Redfern. Shawnee, am I saying that right? Please let me know if I'm saying that right or not. Shawnee Redfern. You can find Shawnee on Twitter at SHAUNI. Shawnee Red FEARN. And we will link to these in the show notes, of course. Thank you, Shawnee. And then Spencer Hallam, thank you so much for your support. And India, who can be found on Twitter at Old Swifty. It's India Swift, and she's a cartoonist and an animator. And then also the mysterious K, who doesn't give us any other information other than that one initial, but we appreciate the mysterious K's support. And if you want to I hope you will consider contributing to us at patreon.com/leanitoart, where you will find the shows posted and also the shows we do just for leaners, like Extra Lean, which is recorded once a month to kick off our open mic post, where you can interact with us and share your thoughts and wonderings about visual storytelling and in a private and safe way. Thanks to everybody who supported us.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob.
Okay. Well, to just, throw out this interesting, really simple problem, right? Based on personal motivation, desire, passion, societal values, collective interest in sort of making money, and also official recognition, things that show a signal of accomplishment. Very interesting.
To go back
That's an easy question, Jersey.
To go back to my classroom example, it's like
being facetious.
It's like I am leveling up in my classroom all the time. I am showing up with a spirit of service and with a desire to learn and a desire to experiment and understand what each individual student's problem is and how I can best address that problem. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I don't feel that I am. But in any case, I feel like I'm constantly leveling up, and I know that the students are benefiting from the interaction as well. So I've got that feedback loop, and I've got that, don't judge by money, judge by satisfaction. Got that part down pat. But if I'm not leveling up in a way that is sending a signal to a broader community, then eventually I will run out of students, and I can't continue to do this leveling up, right?
Okay, so I just doodled something while you were describing this, and to me, I see a dynamic between a few different forces.
Okay.
Okay, forgive this phrasing, what have you. It's a rough draft. What you're describing is sort of the self-directed learning experience of a and with an outcome of a desire to serve. And I think what connects the sort of self-mastery and service is learning, right? So self-mastery and providing service, the feedback you get is learning. And then what if there's this other branch to that where self-mastery and service can generate opportunity, and that can lead to earning? So now you're engaging in trade. So somehow there's a relationship among these forces and outcomes of self-mastery, service, opportunity, and then you have learning and earning. And the earning is the engaging in trade. And how does that meet with your expectations and interests and um, motivation. It's really, I don't think it's a simple thing to solve, but then there's roughly elements, and go ahead and arrange them and cast your spell.
You're saying that the experimentation happens all the way down, is what you're trying to tell me.
I think it does, because through working on projects that I believe in, through part of that belief being the desire to serve, listening to the audience that it serves, gaining insights through empathy and curiosity, and incorporating that in to the, and like there's somehow um, there's learning. I think some insights better, right? So this podcast, or pick a project. I mean, and that's something. But then that's something. So here's what's funny is that each of those feedback loops, I also think, are separable. So I think you can be learning, or you can be learning without earning. You can be earning without learning. And I think my hope is to try to, like, in my experience, is to try to connect all these things. Where if I'm succeeding in being of service, it is somehow leading to opportunities that allow me to earn. And overall, that's how it's panned out. It's not typically direct and simple how that works, but that's also something that isn't simply prescribed in an institutional way until it becomes a class, and then it will be.
Yeah. By virtue of the limitations of a class, it must become that way. Well, it doesn't must become that way, but it tends to become that way. Yeah.
What do you think? Like this whole, like, okay, so you're what I'm hearing, to set you up a little bit, reflecting back, you
Sure.
mentioned I'm working on a thing, and I can tell that it's helping, and
I
I
didn't
can
want
learn
to.
from it. But then what does that mean in this?
Right.
Um,
I wanted to dig at the complexity of that a little bit because, like, while judge don't by the money, judge by the satisfaction.
yeah.
Um, it I totally agree that the most satisfying projects I've ever done were ones where it wasn't like a huge big paycheck that lured me to it. It was the challenge that lured me to it. And I've had some jobs in the last couple of years that paid relatively very well, but that paled in comparison to the creative problem that I solved. Right. Um, I certainly agree with the sentiment, and like you were pointed out, that like that self-directed learning and service-driven performance tends to lead to other opportunities of some sort, and not in direct ways, in ways that, in my experience, not in direct ways, and not in ways where I could even predict they're coming. And this goes back to something Kazu Kibuishi once said on Twitter, where it's like he said, I like to prepare for opportunities rather than look for opportunities, right? And like
hmm.
I think that's a nice succinct way of describing it, right? It's like I work hard in a self-directed way. I'm addicted to learning because I know that that's preparing me for the opportunities that will naturally come out of putting myself out there and helping where I can, right? But on the other hand, I didn't want to just leave that mic on the ground and say, like, so you shouldn't want external validation because, A, I think it's natural to want it, and B, it's a useful signal to get, right? Is this resonating with people? Is this resonating with the audience that I've intended to reach out to, or is it resonating with a different audience? And if so, how? Is this something where it's creating negative resonance or dissonance, and can I learn from that? And is this something where I can self-correct? Um,
Mm-hmm. Where's
it's
that
not
coming
this.
from? Why?
Yeah, it's not this simple platonic sort of like pure thing that I'm creating all here in my own little realm, and it doesn't touch anybody unless I deign it to touch somebody, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, it's not at this particular point in time. I don't feel that there's anything wrong with wanting people to praise the work that you do when you're proud of it.
Mhm. Well, and especially if that has some kind of way to improve how you're learning and what you're doing, and lets you tune into strengths and better ways to
Yeah.
bring your skill about, or point out weaknesses, and if you care to improve or change those, that's
Yeah.
um, those systems of recognition help in a variety of, because when we do things as artists and you desire to make a living out of it, that's a conceit that we often don't explicitly mention, but it informs a lot of what we think about. Um, there's let's see, it inherently turns it into a social act. It's not solo. It's not purely selfish. It's not an um, that's where we've come up with the distinction in the past on the podcast of the difference between art and expression, or no, the service and expression, right?
Right.
Where art for the purpose of service, it's still a creative act, and it's still, it still can have a lot of expression in it, but like its final um, the measures, the ways that you are noticing, did it accomplish what you intended, are wrapped up in things that aren't just inside of you, and
Yeah.
that makes all the difference.
It's I'm remembering now that when I was in high school, and I was taking a lot of art courses, I was drawn to the more commercial art courses. A, because I wanted to work in comics, which was considered more of a commercial art at the time, but also, I think even at a young age, I was more attracted to the idea of designing art to serve a function rather than designing art to just like say something about the way I saw the world, you know? Um, that was my bias even at a young age, right? I wanted to entertain, and I wanted to entertain with a purpose. I didn't want to just say this is inside me and the world needs to know. Nothing wrong with that either, right? I mean, beautiful art's been created that way. Just that's not the way I operate. Um, yeah,
Hmm.
that's service versus expression. Yeah, we've been talking about that for a long time. Um, so what Steve's, I guess what one of Steve's sort of fulcrum points, or one of his particular biases, might be then more of this service driven thing, solve problems for
it's
people.
it's the linking the personal expression and passion, where for him it was solving hard engineering problems,
Mhm.
but then they didn't sort of get their additional excitement and meaning until they also helped people.
Mm,
And so it's not purely one or the other in this, and I think what he was sharing, um, because a lot of it was motivated self-interest of like, well, this um, let's see, he described how he would problem solve, and in the sort of pure engineering sense optimize things and find a way to do stuff with less chips, less wires, less connections, and then suddenly discover that there was another use, because he'd gone so far down this path that, oh my gosh, this was now a new capability. And then he looked for who it might help, and that's where, and if it didn't help anyone, then he just learned something, but he kept at it until he did something that made a difference for people, and including like creating something that would more or less would hum tones into a telephone and hack the phone system. So that had some problems to it, because of course, hacking, and mixed challenges and ethics with that,
in a
which he
public
also
utility.
said, yeah, in public utility, he also said that, yeah, he paid for all of his long distance calls, which I hope so, whatever, good for him. But um and so some of the things he would do, like they weren't like particularly high minded, but they were interesting problems. He knew people had the problems, and he would solve them. But then, of course, worth noting that did lead to, of course, the personal computing revolution.
Right.
You know,
Um,
which that's a nice fallback if you ever get one of those in your pocket. And I don't know. Well, but I did do the personal. computing revolution.
uh, I think
Which
the more
I
interesting
say that
takeaway.
with honor and silliness, whatever. I mean,
Sure.
how amazing.
And
So,
in part of in talking about this thing, A, it's in retrospect, and B, he survived and came out the other side and he was wildly successful. So it's easy to, conflate his experience with, well, that's the recipe, that's the roadmap. I think the takeaway, the thing to underline is that you can't know where it will lead, right? There's no way he sat down and said, "Hey, let's start the personal computer revolution."
mm-hmm.
I think that's the takeaway, right?
Yes, absolutely, and that the service drivenness was deep within there. Like there was stories he mentioned that I wish could have been expounded upon, like an aside where he said, "Yeah, we made sure it was never publicized, but I taught in public schools for 8 years." Right? Yeah. What? He did, and he was like, yeah, giving myself was more meaningful than just donating money for schools to buy computers. And so that personal motivation to the service, it just was a very big. Yes, the topic he loved is fascinating, but it didn't become the the rewarding fascination until it changed people's lives for the better in some way.
Mm.
And it seems like he's carrying that through even like later in his career, later in his life.
Well, that's another reframing too that I think is kind of helpful to consider is that when we're hungry for people to interact with our stuff, is it because we want the validation or is it because we want to know that it was useful?
Yeah. And yes. Because earlier in my life, I would have said, well, the one, not the other. But no, I'm like, yes, both are good. Because, if this worked well for you, come on back. Don't
Yeah.
forget.
Don't forget. Subscribe to the channel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Are we getting close to final thoughts then?
Yeah, okay.
So okay, we'll
What do I
take one
have
more
left
little
for
break,
final
and then we're
thoughts?
gonna wrap up our thoughts on this whole topic of
Uh-huh.
I think a familiar topic to the show, but fresh coming from Steve Wozniak's point of view
Mm-hmm.
and our sort of ruminating on our reactions to it.
Mm-hmm.
So in about a minute or so, we'll conclude with our final thoughts on this thing. But I got a challenge for you, Rob, for our second and
Yeah.
final ad spot. Because we do have to thank some sponsors of the show, and the sponsors are us. We're going to talk a little bit about the stuff that we make. But I'm wondering if we could talk about the things that we make from what service we hope for it to perform and what expression it has for us.
Mm.
How is it
Okay.
an expression, and how do we hope it will be a service?
Let's do that.
All right, cool. So the first thing we'll talk about is my thing, because I got control of the control boards here. And that is my comic Boulder and Fleet, which is a comic about a bear and a bird who go from town to town and help people in trouble. They're not necessarily looking for trouble. They're actually looking just to have a peaceful existence. But when you travel, you encounter people with various kinds of needs. And in this particular story, they are facing off with a bully in a cafe by having a friendly game, solving their dispute with a game. And you can see the latest page up here at boulderandfleet.com. What service do I hope it serves? I am trying to make comics for the young kid like I was who is struggling with this notion of violence as a scary thing that doesn't seem to solve the problem except to prove who has the most power in the room. Which, as a child, I had a difficult time reconciling that with fairness. So I'm trying to make stories that help kids wrestle with that idea. That's the service that I hope to render. What is it an expression of? It's an expression of everything that I love about adventure storytelling, which is the beauty of physical action, and the sublime kind of beauty that comes from incredible power being wielded in the world. And that's where like the action adventure sort of interaction happens in the story with giant monsters and explosions and incredibly powerful characters, but also really cute characters. My Instagram profile says I mostly post pictures of cute things being brave because that's my favorite thing in the whole world. Is like I love Ewoks, Rob. I love them. Why do I love them?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're really cute little bears, and they are super, super brave. They're fighting gigantic metal monsters with whatever they've
Mm-hmm.
got. That's pretty cool. So yeah, so that's all of it goes into my comic. Rob, you make a game.
Yeah, I do. And that game is called This Panda Needs You. And it's, let's see, it's in service of people who are looking for, of any age, a mellow shape stacking experience, a little bit of light puzzle solving. And then especially for the young ones in your life, where those are new skills that they're building, and that's where my wife we co-designed it, and she that was a big part of what informed the sort of service aspect of that game. And well, as far as expression, I believe in encouraging feedback loops, and I believe in this sort of interactive medium of games can do things that that aren't the sort of, oh, this is so addictive and I'm scared of losing this opportunity and I'm going to spend some money and the points and whatever. It can just be rewarding and fun feedback, because you can't have someone over your shoulder all the time saying, "Hey, good job." There's a little panda jumping up and down in happiness and excitement with some happy flute in the background and telling you that, "Yay, you're doing this." And so it's encouraging, and I believe in that. So there's the expression and the service of that.
And you can get it at this-panda.com or search for this panda in the iTunes App Store.
It's for
iPad
iPhone
or
and iPad. Yep.
yeah. Okay, but let's talk purely service at this point, because if you're here because not because of the stuff we make, but more about the way we engage with ideas, then you can find more of that kind of stuff at leanintoart.com/workshops, where we have video workshops that you can download at a price of your choosing, even free. But if you decide that you download it for free and you decide like this thing actually did provide a service and it did provide me with value, you can always go back and purchase it properly, like to basically think about it as giving us a tip for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got comics workshops in there, and Rob has, as you can imagine, some UI UX workshops and making video games workshops in there.
Mm-hmm.
You can find them today at leanintoart.com/workshops. If you want to just give us some of that positive feedback we were talking about, the validation, letting us know, giving us a signal that what we're doing is meaningful. There's a free thing you can do, and that's by going to iTunes, and that's giving us a star review. 5-star review would be really, really nice. Or even write a review. That'd be super awesome if you actually took the time to write a few words on what the show means to you. That helps the show, rise in search rankings. It raises our relevance, helps more people discover us. Or if you're watching the video on YouTube right now, giving it a thumbs up would help in the same way. It sends another signal to everybody else that what we're doing is meaningful. And thanks to everybody who has supported us in any of the ways that we described in the last minute and a half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. It's very encouraging, and we deeply appreciate it.
All right, so final thought on this whole thing of
Okay.
not purely just going off to solve problems and then finding, like simply just turning around and like, hey, this person needed this thing solved after all, and so now I've got a good feedback loop, and now I've changed the entire world. Not to put a glib light on what Steve Wozniak was saying, because actually I think anybody who's been paying attention to this episode has seen me enthusiastically nodding along with almost everything he said. So.
Okay. So what sets you up? Like what extra thing or element could help you be in the position to do that would be one way to interpret what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an underlying theme, and my paraphrasing, but like someone asked, there was a sort of an audience hand-in cards thing, and also the professor on stage doing the interview would paraphrase and whatnot, these quite different questions, and the professor asked essentially like, what if you were getting into technology today? What would you do? And that seemed to be Steve Wozniak looking at like, well, what would be those things feeding my excitement and through interesting problems to solve and fascinating capabilities and whatnot. And he said that he would probably be into AI and robotics, which is, to me, just observing that, it's like you think about how there was this fledgling, but clearly evident, like interest and participation and effort going on related to computers, and then somehow gaining that capability in your home day to day, right? So like the personal computing was sort of all like being attempted and growing in interest much, well, and to a far greater extent. Like today, I don't know if it's possible now in today's world to have something that's so fledgling and grassroots feeling about tech, right? But something that is kind of early and giving that similar signals being AI and robotics. So to me, that is this meta thing of exploring and looking for the general space that's like, I'm not sure what will come of this, but I want to dive into that and see who cares about it. Because I'm getting in, it's not just his own signal. It's not just his own passion. I think there's a filter of like, where's the action, and where, like, is that an interesting place that I want to go to?
And when you say AI, we're not just talking. Are you talking specifically about like personal
Artificial
assistance?
intelligence.
So artificial intelligence to do what?
It's a big space, so you could think about things like machine learning, which is more or less feeding a lot of data at algorithms to then come up with machine-generated heuristics that characterize data. So what that would be like, the machine may not know what these different groupings mean in the data, but then you using that machine learning could then say, here's the meaning of groupings, these different things. And so, it's almost like human augmented machine learning, where, like, think about sort of computer vision and how do you recognize, is there a face in the scene and all that kind of stuff. That's been a problem that's starting to get solved pretty well by machine learning, but also by humans shaping this stuff to get it to become better at it when that improvement is being recognized. So there's that, but then there's artificial intelligence as far as truly modeling the process of human thought. That's like from the ground up, saying like, well, this is how I imagine intelligence works, and essentially modeling through code neurons and synapses. Then you have genetic algorithms, which is kind of this other area of it, right? Where you have genetic algorithms are almost like these little voting things that are like, I think this, I think that, and then like, setting the chromosomes, if you will, on this chunk of information, and then seeing what happens over generations, and then testing a generation, saying like, well, this generation totally died, or this one lived and seemed to solve a problem, and then a human tuning to say, that's like a different version of the machine learning thing, where just a different mechanism. My rough, quick explanation. But like AI is like, it's really just, it's like simulated intelligence, and it's a big space of a bunch of different disciplines. So
I think the place I most hear about it mentioned is when people talk about personal assistance, right? Amazon Echo, that kind of thing. But I was reminded of this just today, and I posted the Edges to Cats thing. Have you seen this, Rob?
No. What's this?
Okay. So I'll do a live demo on it. And this is at afinelayer.com/pixserve. I think if I remember right, it uses some of that technology from, what is that Google thing called?
TensorFlow. Yeah.
What's that?
TensorFlow.
What's TensorFlow? I'm seeing it on my screen.
So TensorFlow is this big, it's a big data machine learning project and set of tools that Google built in house to help with recognizing patterns and information, and then they open sourced it. So they also have a platform, their whole Google Cloud stuff, where you can try to you can work to take advantage of this. And there is actually a project called Machine Learning for Artists, and it's like ML4A. I saw a talk on that at IO, I believe, last year. And anyway, that this is it's an interesting space where if like you're an artist and maybe you do a little bit of creative coding or what have you, this world may sound alien, but it's not that far out of your reach as soon as you're able to start looking at coding, because there are tools that are being provided by different ecosystems like TensorFlow that can help you quite a bit. I mean, it still is, not like falling off a log, easy to learn, but, doable. And there are a lot of people out there teaching this, and even for artists in particular. So, yeah.
So I'm doing the demo right now. And so this website allows you to play with this technology to where I'm just drawing some shapes.
Oh.
Which all have different assignments, right? So like light blue is the window head. Put some window sills on here, right? Burgundy is door. Orange is trim. Green is like bright green is balcony. So now I hit process, and it outputs a image generated based on my input, right?
That is fantastic.
And then the craziest one is the outline to cat one. And this is one that, like, I noticed Casey Van Heist playing with this, and that's how I got alerted to it. Because, of course, Casey Van Heist, friend of the show. So let me clear this.
Oh, my gosh.
So check this out. I'm going to make a line, and I'll make a cat shape. So.
Whoa.
And I hit process. Oh, that didn't work.
It kind of worked.
It kind of worked. Let me do another one where I do.
I mean, you got an over-the-shoulder view of a cat. All right, now you're trying to make sure that, okay,
I'm
this
trying
cat
to make sure
is
it gets
facing
eyes
this.
on it. Okay, process. Right. Getting there.
Wow, that was a very evil-looking cat.
Let's try this. So,
and
anyway.
that cat's a little more fun-loving.
A little. So, and then they even have like a shoe generator, basically like reading your outlines and building a shoe out of it, which is kind of crazy, right? So this is also a form of artificial intelligence, is it not?
Yeah. I mean, it's based on it's machine learning that has created these different categories that have let's see, it's essentially using machine learning to generate new content. So machine learning has processed old content, you're giving new input, and wow, okay, it's kind of a horseish looking cat. I wonder what's going to happen.
So, anyway, if I do the nose, there we go.
Wow.
So, anyway, it's a fun thing to play with. finelayer.com/pixsurf, PIXSRV. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. Okay. But I forget the name of that Google project where they were doing some kind of like image recognition where it was like mutating the photos and putting eyeballs all over them. Was it Deep Dream?
Deep Dream, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. So there are a lot of humorous, disturbing images from that.
Yes, there are.
And let's see. So where are you going with this? Where are we?
Oh, when you started talking about machine learning, it reminded me of this thing that I was just playing with today, which was using machine learning to generate images based on simple input, right?
Mm-hmm. And so you can see, like, this is early days for this interesting space, and you may find that there are not yet problems being solved, that people are having difficulties or needs or what have you. but you might, because you care about this problem a lot, and because you're doing that sort of matchmaking and exploration and motivated, search, where you'll probably find an audience that's somewhere near up, needing the thing that you're working with, and then you keep at it. So that's the, that's looking at the sort of a different take on the Wozniak story of, well, instead of being at the ground floor of the personal computing revolution, there's a ground floor of other things going on right now.
And showing up and figuring out how you can help and how you can level up in helping and watching for those signals is the way to get started. And you have no way of knowing where it's all going to end up.
That's I think, but that it, I think I'm pretty sure that's where our podcast ends up.
All right, nicely done. All right, yes, this show will be back next week, and it will be downloadable as a podcast at leanintoart.com or patreon.com/leanintoart. You can get it both places. Do give us a review or subscribe in your podcatcher, whether it's iTunes or Stitcher. You can find us there. You can find us in Google Play if you collect your podcast there. And then, tell your friends if you find this stuff to be useful. That would also be a really great way to help us, and we wouldn't even know. We won't even know. It'll be one of those invisible ways that this thing gets carried forward. So, but thanks to everybody who has been downloading, listening, and watching. And until next episode, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stendinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to shut the stream off. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us.
Yay, thank you.